Good evening.
Good evening.
Right. Before I say what I'm about to say, I'd like to say two things. One, all Doctor Who is good Doctor Who, because Doctor Who is just great.
If you're going to diss this, I'm not going to be part of this.
Point two, my son loves Fear Her. He absolutely loves it, and he raves about it and thinks it's absolutely brilliant. Okay. Fear Her's the worst Doctor Who we've watched since Terror of the Vervoids, and I've thought long and hard about that whilst pottering about, and I've gone through, and I really genuinely feel that Terror of the Vervoids was the last episode that was particularly bad. Now, tell me if I'm wrong.
You're wrong.
Thank you. No, I'm not. Anyway, the thing with Fear Her is, well, there's a number of things wrong, but the most fundamental thing wrong with Fear Her is there's too many elements that do not cohere. You see, I think personally, before I say this, one of the joys of Doctor Who is ramming some things together and just seeing what happens. Not like that.
What you're going to say.
No, but it is. You take disparate things, and Doctor Who is an opportunity to put disparate things together and see what happens. The problem is, there's just too many disparate things here, and tonally, loads of these things don't work together. And tone, I think, is one of the fundamental problems with Fear Her, and that is rife throughout the episode. First and foremost, this is set in July 2012? July, yeah. I seem to remember that was a fairly nice weather in July 2012. But I'm absolutely convinced when they were filming this in January, it was not very nice weather. And the fact that they've had to crank up the insert technical term, saturation, contrast, whatever it is, they've had to do to this to make it look anywhere passable at summer, gives this episode the weirdest of looks. It just looks odd.
It looks really fake, doesn't it?
Yeah, and Lib at one point said, why have they superimposed that or whatever when Tennant and Piper were in front of a building? And it wasn't. It's just the colours are just so garish that there's just something quite unsettling about this, but not in a good way. I think that having us in suburbia again, after Love and Monsters, last episode, which really did a fantastic job of treating sort of suburban, just normal life as something worth watching, and then contrast to this, it's very, 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 very weird. I think that although Tennant and Piper are really good together in this, and they do, this is the last opportunity really of those two just to play Doctor and Companion with no sort of fundamental threat, you know, profound and ultimately long-lasting threat to their relationship. We get to see them working together, and that works well. But even then, there's some odd quirks of character in this, like, for example, when the Doctor takes the marmalade and just sticks his fingers in, that's not a Tennant character trait. That's a Capaldi thing. That's a Tom Baker thing. It's a really odd moment that I can't think, what's the word? What's the word I'm looking for?
Antecedent?
There.
I don't know what you're trying to say.
Well, I'm trying to say that. But I can't think of anywhere else in Tennant's era where that sort of thing happens. It just feels like an odd, quirky, doctorish moment that doesn't quite fit here. Stick it in Capaldi's era, that'll be fine. Not that that's happened yet, but you know what I mean. You've got the 2012 stuff, fine. In principle, doing a pre-Olympic story, even though it feels a little bit hokey and weird now, that makes a lot of sense. But in the middle of this, you get creepy child, fine. We can do creepy children, that's okay. But the central tension of Chloe is that she is a normal kid who has been sort of, well, we'll get into that, but possessed or sort of adopted by this essentially benevolent alien. But all the way through, this alien's a right little bugger.
I feel sorry for the little alien.
I feel sorry for the little alien, but well, okay. I feel sorry for the little alien one step removed. The way that Tennant tells us about this alien, I'm thinking, yeah, I totally get this. But the actual programme doesn't do the sort of, the production, that's the word I'm looking for, doesn't do that audience emotional response any favours, because Chloe's actually just really weird and creepy. At no point does that sort of soften and you go, oh, poor little alien inside, up until the very end. But the most fundamental issue here in garish suburban street, comedy tarmacker, by the way, little odd nod towards potential sort of Ku Klux Klan racism at the start, which just hits like a hammer, and you're thinking, what? Anyway.
Where was that?
Well, when they're having the argument in the street, there's just a couple of things that there's one particular neighbour who has, what's his name, Cam or whatever.
But it's because she doesn't like the street sweepers.
Well,
Not him being brown.
It didn't feel like that to me. It came across as overtly aggressive. But this is the thing. At the heart of this, we've got child snatching and abusive fathers. Bloody hell. Those are big, fundamental things to be chucking about in a Doctor Who story. I think child snatching... honestly about to say, child snatching's okay. No,
Fine, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
but this is it. In Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, there's a perfect balance of Roald Dahl-y, it's not Roald Dahl, is it? It's flipping Ian Fleming. But anyway, that sort of creepy, grown-up, and eeriness, but it's offset beautifully. Like, that is handled really, really well. It's not here. It just isn't. That isn't... Nothing about this response to the street, to the child snatching, holds true whatsoever. You know, even the point where it says... they go in a really convoluted way. The kid at the start who disappears, they sort of work it in that, it's not his dad in the street talking to them, it's his friend's dad. It's like, no, everybody would be freaking bricking it. Nobody would remain in that street. So I totally don't buy into that. And then you've got the abusive dad. Now, we will see, obviously, breaking the rules of the Whoathon here, we will see as we go forward.
I don't think you've got any respect for the rules of the Whoathon.
But, okay.
You break the rules all the time.
There will be points in the future where I will say, now this is too much for Doctor Who, right? And I know that I'm somebody who likes that you can tell any story with Doctor Who, you can tell any story. Well, that is true, but there's moments and scenes and concepts where I think that Doctor Who pushes too far, right? And, not trying to predict the future, but when Moffat does that, I kind of think, right, I've got to work this out, I've got to buy into this. This standalone, Monster of the Week episode of Doctor Who should not be messing about with abusive dads. It's not an area...
Why?
Because I just don't think... There's not enough space in the episode to make it work. It's just too heavy a concept to play off against abandoned alien, a traumatised child, 2012 Olympics, oversaturated street, Doctor and Rose messing about. It's like there's no room to properly do abusive dads in this story. I'm not even sure what Doctor Who story there would be, but I'm sure, the genius writers that we've been fortunate to have in Doctor Who could do it if they wanted to, but this episode doesn't have the room to do it. And it doesn't do it justice. And as a result, it completely unbalances the programme, I think. And it just results in something that just, for me, feels very awkward and clumsy to watch. Now, you've got to bear in mind, as I said at the start, Humphrey loves this episode. He absolutely loves this episode. There's something about the concept of, drawing people into sort of prisons and trapping them and snatching them away. There's a great idea sitting within that. But that's the body of your thing. Not the 2012 Olympics, not the ship crashing in the road, not the cars breaking down, which is just a throwaway thing that never really... Why do the cars break down? Why do the cars break down?
Because of the force that's coming out from the...
Is it draining the energy?
I think it's just messing with the energy. That's why you can feel the residual energy and stuff like that. We're not paying attention.
The best thing about this episode is the sight gag at the start where the TARDIS lands the wrong way around. That bit's absolutely brilliant.
And the fact that Shane Ward's in it.
And Shane Ward's in it, which is odd now because if you're watching this now... Oh, there's one more thing I want to talk about. If you're watching this now, he's now in Strictly Come Dancing, which is Dancing with the Stars if you're in America. Talking of being in America, I don't know where all 3.5 of you that are watching this are from. I know one of you is... no, actually a handful of you, I know personally. If you're not English, you may not realise that this episode is currently not available on the BBC iPlayer.
Hashtag pedo.
Because of a certain newscaster who, as it has turned out, has been convicted for the distribution or the making of, which is awkward legalese, indecent images of children. His name's Hugh Edwards, and he was the voice of the nation for quite a long amount of time. So that's dated this episode badly as well. Although, to be fair, you know, he could be any newscaster. He just is Hugh Edwards, which is a bit odd. So maybe that's also just set my teeth on edge with this episode. Although, as Liv said, I've dissed this episode for years. But even though Humphrey was absolutely delighted to watch it, even though Winnie seemed to get into it, and I think Liv's had a more positive response to it to I've had.
I liked it the first time around though.
Dud. First dud of the revival.
Wrong.
First dud. Just flat dud. And I don't know when the next bad one's coming, so there you go. Anyway, any more to say, darling?
You're wrong. The end.